Is there truly a good side and a bad side in politics? Let's talk about that. Hey everybody, welcome to the show, and today I just wanted to do a quickie on the concept of good and bad. Is it really that simple? So anyway, um, for some reason, earlier today I was thinking about Transformers, right? It was one of my favorite shows as a little kid. My dad showed me the animated movie from 1986 when I was like 5 years old, and I loved it. And I love that cartoon. I still to this day enjoy watching um, Transformers cartoons because they're kind of cool, you know? But Transformers brings up this concept that isn't true to reality. The idea that there's almost always a good side and a bad side. Hardly anything is that black and white, right? If you look at the United States, um, a lot of people would view us as the good guys in most cases. We were the good guys in a lot of cases. We were certainly the good guys in World War II when we defeated Nazi Germany and, we defeated um, fascist Japan, Russia, China. Many would even argue we were the good guys when we went to Vietnam and when we fought for South Korea. I don't necessarily agree with that. Those weren't our conflicts. We shouldn't have even gotten involved. But I certainly would agree that the South Koreans are the good guys when compared to the North Koreans. But it's not always that simple, right? If you look at the past three presidential administrations, that is Donald Trump, Barack Obama, and George W. Bush, there's a lot of sketchy things going on. I mean, Bush brought us into a war that we're still in to this day. This war was started when I was like 3 months old, and we're still there today. Obama was the king of drone strikes. And he didn't just drone strike terrorists. He drone striked drone struck, I don't know. Anyway, he bombed thousands of innocent people. And so is Trump today. And Trump did something even worse. He basically made it so that we are no longer counting the amount of bombs we drop or the amount of civilian casualties. So we literally do not know how many people we're killing in the Middle East now, thanks to the Trump administration. I understand that, especially in America, there's a lot of polarity. You either lean left or you lean right. And if you're not one or the other, you're kind of a lunatic. But it's not that simple. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, whether you're liberal or conservative, there are good things and there are bad things about your candidates. Good things about Donald Trump. He's got a history in business. He's a get things done kind of guy. He pushes really hard for things. He's a really good negotiator. Bad things about Donald Trump? Well, in my opinion, he's not strong enough on opposing gun control. He supports, red flag laws. He banned bump stocks through executive order. He supports universal background checks and things like that. He supports even raising the age to purchase a rifle to 21, which I would view as unconstitutional. After all, when the Constitution was written, there were 14-year-olds who owned guns. He's also putting and this may not be him, it may be Melania or Ivanka talking behind his ear, but still, he's proposing bans on a lot of flavored vape cartridges. He's proposing, actually, he already, as of a few weeks ago, raised the age to purchase any tobacco product to 21 when it was 19. So he's all about raising ages. He's about increasing restrictions, and I'm not for that as a civil libertarian, Another thing I don't think he's good at, while claiming to be conservative, is um, cutting government spending, right? If you saw him in 2016, he said he was going to, not only did he say he would lower the deficit, he literally said he would abolish the debt in 8 years, which, by the way, is not possible. So he said he would abolish the debt in 8 years. Well, in the next 2 years, he added 300 billion to the deficit. He added 200 billion of that to the military budget. He said he was going to bring the troops home, but he really has only just shifted them around. Another thing I don't like about Trump is he's not only, criminalizing drug dealers, his administration is backing, giving drug dealers the death penalty, which is something I strongly oppose. I do not view drug dealership in any form as a legitimate crime, unless you're dealing to minors. Like, obviously, 11, 12-year-olds, 8, 9, 10-year-olds should not be getting, heroin or cocaine. But if you're an adult, if you're 18, or even if you're 17 and you own your own property, like you've, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't live with your parents anymore. You're your own, what I'm thinking of. Anyway, if you're an adult, you should be able to make your own decisions with your life, and that includes what you put into your body. So I think we should decriminalize all drugs, all substances of the sort, because prohibition in general does more harm than good, right? So there's another thing that Donald Trump does bad. Now moving on to the left side of the spectrum. Oh, and in case you were wondering, I agree with Donald Trump about 54% of the time. But anyway, now moving on to the left side of the spectrum. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a champion of the progressive movement. There's a lot to respect about Bernie. He's passionate, he's compassionate, and you can tell that. And the way he talks, it makes it very clear that he, in his view, he fights for the people over the big corporations, over the corrupt government officials. He makes it very clear that his fight is, in his view, for the people. He's opposed to the war on drugs. He's opposed to the war on terror. He wants to, he supports bringing the troops home and federally legalizing marijuana and things like that. And that is one thing, a couple things that I support about him. And I would even view Bernie as, for the most part, a civil libertarian as well. Certainly not a fiscal conservative, as most libertarians are, but he certainly fights for civil liberties, as does Representative Tulsi Gabbard, and even Mr. Andrew Yang, the entrepreneur, and in my view, a genius. So, all right, bad things about Bernie. I'd view his fiscal policy as terrible. Medicare for all is unaffordable, and I think we should privatize healthcare fully. One thing that never gets brought up in discussions in regards to healthcare is the fact that in the 1920s, or up until the 1920s, we had a fully privatized system where we had about 30% of Americans were part of these organizations known as fraternal societies, sometimes also referred to as mutual aid societies. These societies would provide care for the poor, provide medicine, provide, a lot of awesome things for people in need. And government stepped in back in the day because to Big Pharma, medicine was too accessible. That government stepped in because medicine was too accessible. So, as much as people want to use government to solve the issue of the healthcare crisis, government caused the healthcare crisis. Do you really want to trust them with more power when they are the cause of the problem in the first place? Yes, technology has advanced. Yes, medicine has advanced. A lot of that is due to the free market. And it would have been much, much, much better if we had kept it entirely in the private sector. As of right now, we have a few very, very large companies who are allowed to determine the licensing and requirements for being a medical professional, for being a pharmaceutical, for giving out any kind of substance, pretty much. So there's a hell of a lot of regulation, there's a hell of a lot of laws, and these laws, standards, and regulations were set by the large pharmaceutical companies who are paid or who pay the politicians directly to make these laws. What we need to do is get these laws out of the way and allow private companies to innovate. And we can import more too. There are a lot of cool ways that we can bring down prices. We don't need to bring it to the public sector. And another thing is, if you want to bring healthcare to the to the public sector, you know what? I'm not opposed to that entirely. I certainly prefer it to be private, but why don't you do it in your own state? So, localization, I've talked about it a lot. It's an excellent way to, stop all the fighting. If you want public X or Y, do it in your state or do it in your community. We don't need it federally. We should abolish, to be honest, the vast majority of federal institutions, the vast majority of federal programs should be abolished, eliminated completely. And almost everything should be given to the states or to the local communities. Localization stops all the fighting. Because, it's the difference between controlling 300 plus million people in, a nation with a largely closed border, and so it's hard to get in, and likewise, it's hard to get out of the United States because a lot of other countries have very similar laws. So it's hard to travel to other countries, it's hard to leave the States a lot of the time. So a better solution is to have 50 very, very different states. So if you don't like the policies in one state, like, say, a Republican doesn't like the policies in California or New York, or a Democrat doesn't like the policies in Texas or Utah or Arizona, they can move to a different state and they can have their problems solved. It's the difference between controlling hundreds of millions of people and controlling tens of millions in California, or even only a few 100,000 in, like, Wyoming, right? So localization is an excellent idea. So, right, going back to my original point, there is no true good or bad. That's a false dichotomy. There's no true, liberals are not 100% right, or conservatives are not 100% right. There is an in-between. And to every individual, there's a different kind of in-between. Like, some people would say they agree with progressives 80% of the time, while agreeing with conservatives 20% of the time. But almost no one agrees 100% with one side or the other. Personally, I tend to agree with conservatives between 50 and 60% of the time, while I tend to agree with progressives between 20 and 50% of the time. The exception being Andrew Yang, who I agree with about 63% of the time. I don't necessarily agree with universal basic income, but basic income of some sort seems like a good idea, like from the community or from your, like, local level. A federal basic income doesn't necessarily seem like a good idea. But on a lot of other issues, I agree with Yang. He is, for the most part, in favor of, as is Trump, for the most part in favor of deregulating the market and letting the market innovate, essentially. Because he's an entrepreneur. He understands how the market works and how it flows. He's in favor of, just like Bernie, just like Tulsi, strongly in favor of bringing the troops home, ending the war on drugs, and in general, having a more rehabilitative justice system for, people who are addicted to drugs and things like that, rather than a punitive one. There are quite a few other things that I agree with Mr. Yang on, but to be honest, I haven't really looked into his platform all this much. I appreciate him as a person, and I enjoy the light that he's bringing to the conversation. But anyway, that's pretty much my 2 cents. There is no true right or wrong, especially when you're comparing progressives and conservatives. That is a false dichotomy. One more thing quick. Going back to the concept of Transformers, right? There was this character in the 3rd live-action movie who went by the name of Sentinel Prime. And he differed from the norm of, Autobot versus Decepticon by, unlike most Transformers characters, having an actual motive to his actions. His motive was, his view was that he would save his people by, destroying Earth. So Sentinel is a good guy in his view, whereas he's a bad guy in the view of the Autobots. The Decepticons, for some dumb reason, view themselves as the bad guys, and that's very clear in the way that they talk, in the way that they scheme, that they're evil, that their goal is to, take over the universe. Their goal is war. Their goal is terror. And they don't have any real motive. A good character in any kind of movie, in any kind of show, a good antagonist has to be the good guy in his view, right? Every single antagonist, every good antagonist has a backstory of some sort, has a motive, like I honestly can't name you any good examples because most of modern TV and film like to signal this idea that there is a good side and a bad side in almost every case, but that simply isn't true. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, give it a like, share, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, and let's, have a conversation. So yeah, thanks, bye.
America, take a good look at your beloved candidates. They're nothing but hideous space reptiles. It's true. We are aliens. But what are you going to do about it? It's a 2-party system. You have to vote for one of us.
You're right. This is a 2-party system.
Well, I believe I'll vote for a 3rd-party candidate.
Go ahead. Throw your vote away.
All hail President K!
I don't understand why we have to build a ray gun to aim at a planet I never even heard of.
Don't blame me. I voted for Kodos.